Hello and welcome. I am Ellie Richardson and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. We have some breaking news. Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces mounting pressure after media scrutiny over his appointment of Peter Mandelson as the UK ambassador to Washington, amid revelations of Mandelson's connections to convicted US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The PM is now addressing the media. Let's listen in.
I did so after a career in the criminal justice system, including as Director of Public Prosecutions. I entered politics not for personal gain, not for status, and not to live a life detached from the reality that most people face. I entered politics because I wanted to change our country for the better, to make it fairer, safer, more secure. And I still believe that most people who serve in public life, whether as civil servants or elected politicians, do so for the same reason, because they believe in service, because they believe in duty, because they believe in the public good. But that is not why some people do it. And that is not why Mandelson did it. And that sense of duty only matters if the standards of public life are upheld. And in recent days, serious allegations and serious evidence has emerged concerning Mandelson's conduct, including his relationship with Epstein, a convicted sex offender. It had been publicly known for some time that Mandelson knew Epstein, but none of us knew the depth and the darkness of that relationship. What has come to light has raised serious questions. Information that was not known at the time of his appointment. Before he was appointed ambassador, Mandelson was asked directly about the nature of his relationship with Epstein. He was asked whether he had stayed at Epstein after his conviction. And when, later, further information came to light, he was asked whether he had accepted gifts and hospitality, about whether he had been fully transparent about the relationship. The information now available makes clear that the answers he gave were lies. He portrayed Epstein as someone he barely knew. And when that became clear, and it was not true, I sacked him. Such deceit is incompatible with public service. Let me be clear, no one is above accountability. And no one, however well connected, however experienced, however senior, should hold public office if they cannot meet the basic test of honesty. I also want to address the publication of the information Mandelson provided during the appointment process. I understand the strength of public feeling. I share the anger that people feel when powerful individuals appear to escape scrutiny. And I want to be able to release those documents as quickly as possible. I wanted to release them yesterday, in fact, and to talk about them at Prime Minister's questions. But the police have advised that releasing certain information now could risk prejudicing a future investigation or legal process. And however frustrating from my personal point of view that is, and it is, I will not take any step, however politically tempting, however popular, that risks justice for victims. Because this is not and must never become a political game. The victims of Epstein have lived with trauma that most of us can barely comprehend. And they've had to relive it again and again. They have seen accountability delayed and too often denied. To them, I want to say this: I am sorry. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies and appointed him. And sorry that even now you're forced to watch this story unfold in public once again. But I also want to say this: in this country, we will not look away. We will not shrug our shoulders. And we will not allow the powerful to treat justice as optional. We will pursue the truth. We will uphold the integrity of public life. And we will do everything within our power and in the interests of justice to ensure accountability is delivered. That is what the public expects. That is what the victims deserve. And it is what I will do. Now, I'm here today in Hastings for similar reasons. Because I love this country. It is the greatest country in the world. The progress and prosperity I've seen throughout my life, the journey that I've been on personally, from a working class background to this, I owe everything to this country and its values. I've spent most of my professional life serving them, not just in politics. And I believe that pride, shared by millions.
We are now being joined by Robinda Sachdev, who's an international affairs expert, joining us from New Delhi. As we've just seen in Keir Starmer's speech, he has said multiple times that he shares the anger and he has he understands that the public want more, that they he wants to release this information, that he stands by the public, he's sorry to the victims. He's also received a lot of scrutiny from the media, and my question is, how significant are these media narratives, such as headlines that are declaring that the game is up, in shaping public perception of Prime Minister's political stability or decline?
Starmer's stability or decline I'll go into later, but first let's come to the issue that Starmer is addressing. He's talking about the Mandelson case and that, they will investigate more, etc. I would say that the only way Starmer can repent for his own misjudgment, and the only way that Starmer can show British leadership would be to get Scotland Yard and be it MI5, MI6, British intelligence, to investigate all of the Epstein files which have been released for British names in that. And there are supposed to be about, a few dozen of top influential, powerful, several names are mentioned in emails, etc. at various levels. Get Scotland Yard to investigate all the British names in those files. Pursue them to the end of justice. That is how you get justice to the victims. Just, dismissing Mandelson and getting the case going against him, sure, that's just one thing. But there are many other people amongst the powerful, rich, quote unquote, whatever of the Epstein circles who are British and who are there in the emails. One. And secondly, the victims. Scotland Yard, supposedly the world's best detective agency. Let us see how good it is. The US DOJ is sure investigating, going back and forth. There is, multiple things going on there. But why leave the leadership investigation of such a critical case, let's say, to only the United States? Why is the UK not able to take up on its own investigations into those who are named and the victims and bring justice to those victims? That is what Starmer should be doing right now. What he's doing right now is something different. He's justifying his decision for Mandelson, but he's trying to ensure what you asked the question. He's trying to ensure that he stays as the face of the Labour Party going into the future, into the elections, as to his vision of the UK and the Labour Party and his leadership. That's what he's doing right now. I can understand that as a politician. But what he should be doing in parallel is getting the wheels going for a high-level, time-bound investigation by the Scotland Yard.
Just don't go too far. Stay with us as we will be joining back shortly. The Kremlin dismissed as nonsense suggestions from Western media and Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk that late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein may have been a Russian intelligence asset. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov addressed the claims during a press conference, calling them unworthy of serious consideration. He emphasized that such suggestions should not be taken seriously and urged to avoid wasting time on unfounded claims. This comes after Poland announced it would investigate possible links between Epstein and Russia intelligence after Tusk called for an inquiry into the potential implications for Poland. We are now being joined back by Robinda. Thank you so much for joining us back here. Why is the Kremlin so quick to dismiss claims linking Epstein to Russian intelligence?
Why would any country not be so quick to deny? I mean, just as it said that, Epstein was a Russian agent, many more reports are saying that he was a Mossad agent. So if tomorrow the same question is asked to the Israeli government, will not the Israeli government immediately say no? So fair enough, let Poland investigate. Let Poland investigate Epstein. Poland has its own intelligence abilities, whichever, limited, whatever, collaborate with others and find out on whose behalf Jeffrey Epstein was working. Poland do that. It's the same thing which I'm saying with regards to the British. The British, Europe for too long has been totally dependent on America. That comes back to Donald Trump's grouse and grumble, right? Outsourcing its security, outsourcing its security, essentially national security, to the Americans. This is a classic case of that. This is a huge scandal worldwide, or at least between the US and Europe. Okay, so European countries who are concerned should take up this matter ASAP. If there are any of their individuals involved, if there are any of the victims from their countries involved, Poland should investigate, go through the entire Epstein file with a comb and see if any Polish victims are there. And if Poland feels that he was an agent of the Kremlin, they should investigate that. Let us get going rather than just hurling, accusations and all. As it is, the Epstein file, there is so much information there. And unfortunately, by the way, it's giving rise to such crazy kind of, narratives also, which is simply horrific to even imagine if those could have been there. I imagine many of those are maybe, fancies or imagination people, the conspiracy theories, maybe I think a lot of those, but investigate them.
Thank you so much, Rabinder, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have seized 2 oil tankers with foreign crews in the Gulf, alleging fuel smuggling, and the flags of the vessels and the nationalities of the crews have not been disclosed. The seizures took place amid heightened tension as Washington dispatched a naval group to their region after Tehran's deadly response to anti-government protests and US President Donald Trump's warning that Tehran must accept a nuclear deal. It is not immediately clear what flags the tankers were carrying for the nationalities of the crew. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has spoken about his country's efforts to prevent rising tensions between the US and Iran from escalating into a regional conflict. Erdogan emphasized that Turkey is doing everything it can to keep the situation from spiraling into chaos. He praised the ongoing diplomatic efforts between the US and Iran, calling them positive. Erdogan also suggested that talks at the leadership level between the American and Iranian presidents would be a valuable next step, following the lower-level discussions that have already taken place. According to his office, Erdogan believes that higher-level talks could bring out more significant progress in easing tensions and finding common ground between the two nations. We are now being joined by Saul Sadka, joining us from Tel Aviv, who's a political commentator. Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World today. What role can Turkey realistically play in preventing the US-Iran tensions from escalating into broader regional conflict?
Nothing. There's nothing that Turkey can do to stop the conflict. The Iranian regime has been saying for more than 47 years now, death to America, and they're not joking about that. And now they are surrounded by American military assets in all directions. Firing squad has been lined up all around them, of some of the most powerful military equipment ever invented. And there is nothing that can be done by Turkey to stop that happening. The only people that can stop the tension from rising up to the level of war between Iran and the United States right now are the Iranians. The Iranians essentially have to capitulate to the United States' demands. They have to hand over their remaining nuclear material and equipment. They have to dismantle most of their missile program that threatens the entire region. And they have to stop funding their proxies. And unless they do that, my guess is we are going to see some kinetic activity within the next few weeks. And Turkey certainly can't be of help in this.
And does Erdogan's call for higher level US-Iran talks signal growing regional frustration with lower level diplomacy? And what impact could this have on future negotiations that we know are going to happen, especially on tomorrow?
Well, there's no particularly higher level that it could be done with. You're talking about Witkoff and other people that are in constant communication with the President of the United States. You can't get higher level than that unless the President would come himself, and that's certainly not going to happen. And in any case, the Iranians don't seem serious. Just as you mentioned just before, they have just taken control of 2 foreign tankers off their coast and captured their crews. That is casus belli, if you have ever heard of one. That would certainly be it. They are playing a very dangerous and stupid game, and they are probably about to find out the results of that game in the very near future, is my guess. And these talks, unless they agree to the essentially capitulation demands of the United States, which, while some in the Iranian regime might want to do, most likely they actually practically can't because of the religious madmen in their midst who would rather go down with the ship. Unless they agree to those terms, which they probably can't, for practical reasons, they are going to get bonked by the American Navy that are sitting off their shore. And that will be the final end of the Iranian nuclear program and the missile program. And if the regime can continue to limp on after that, perhaps for a few years, is very likely. But once they have no further deterrent, eventually that is the end of them, because they've got no economy and no deterrent and a very angry and resentful population.
Thank you. Please don't go too far, as we will be back with you shortly. Palestinians reunite with their family members after the Rafah crossing finally reopens. Although 150 people were scheduled to leave, out of which 25 civilians have already returned to their homeland. Families exchanged emotional moments as crowd gathers around a bus bringing the refugees at midnight. Let's hear what Palestinians had to say about their experience.
أهلي إخوتي زوجي هاي اللي خلاني أرجع. بعدين أرضي هاي ما بتخلى عنها، ما بقدر أسيبها، ما بقدر أكون في مكان تاني. صح أنا طالعة وكل إشي كان في هناك كل سبل الراحة، بس ما كنت مرتاح لأنه مش مكاني هون، مكاني غزة. هذا هو أرضي، هذه هي وطني.
We are now being joined by Sul Sadka again. Thank you for joining us back here. What does the limited movement of the 25 people from each direction tell us about the political and security calculations shaping the Rafah crossings reopening? As we heard, there was meant to be over 100, but only 25 was allowed through. And for these emotional reunions, what does this limited movement mean?
Well, the limited movement tells you what the new Rafah crossing is. The Rafah crossing used to be a border between Hamas-controlled Gaza and Egypt, and that was the case for 20 years. And it operated mostly without any kind of Israeli involvement, but it was often closed because the Egyptians did not want any kind of contact with the Hamas regime over a decade. In fact, the city of Rafah straddles the border, and the western half that was inside Egypt was entirely demolished about 10 years ago. And there's just rubble now. And now there's only rubble on the other side, because that's the effect of terrorism. If you turn your city into a terror hub and dig tunnels under every building, it ends up getting destroyed. So what's left in Rafah now is a totally new regime. The Israelis completely control Rafah, or the ruins of Rafah, and there is a 3-kilometer buffer zone between the Egyptian border and the parts of Gaza that are still controlled by Hamas. And they are only allowing people to cross the Rafah crossing subject to Israeli security checks. So effectively, anyone that wants to get into Gaza from Egypt has to first cross through 2 miles of Israeli territory and go through Israeli security checks. And ditto in the other direction, people wanting to leave Gaza are first being approved and checked by the Israeli security forces to ensure that they are the kind of people who Israel is not searching for as suspects in the various crimes that were committed, and also that they are people that are entitled to leave. And if that is the case, they are allowed out. That's quite a long process. My guess is the waiting list to leave Gaza is into the hundreds of thousands. And those people certainly should not be forced, if they have not been involved in terrorism, to live amid the ruins that Hamas has brought upon them, and should be allowed to leave if they at all can. And in the other direction too, if there are really people that want to return to the ruins of Gaza, they should be allowed to come in as long as they are not associated with terrorism and are not carrying with them any kind of weaponry.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Firefighters are continuing operations in a town south of Lisbon after heavy rainfall caused flooding across several areas. Emergency crews have been pumping water out of homes, shops and basements where water levels rose quickly. Several roads were temporarily closed and drivers and residents were advised to avoid flooded areas. Local authorities say fire services were working with municipal teams to clear water and check for structural damage. Officials confirm no serious injuries have been reported, but warn that unstable weather conditions could slow clean-up efforts and cause further disruption. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.